look at the man, many of the things he has done through his life are legendary, but he's also a very forgiving man. In that 2 years ago, in a quest for Oklahoma State, also my alma mater, that played Iowa State in a game that should have been a walkover. Iowa State, if you might remember this, won that game. Mr. Pickens forgave you, and he's here to speak to you. Please welcome Boone Pickens.
That was not a fun night at Ames. We were supposed to win the game. An economist, one time I was going to speak at Cornell, and this guy was going to introduce me, and so he was a little bit nervous, and I tried to relieve him, and before I spoke, we had 30 minutes that we were eating, and he said, "Mr. Pickens, how long will you be speaking?" And I said, "I don't care." I said, 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever you want. And straight face, he you know, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I've got a decision to make here. And so we ate a little longer. He said, "I'd really prefer you to go closer to 5 minutes than 5 hours." Okay, I'll keep it closer to 5 minutes. So then I got up and spoke. The question was asked me by somebody. I said, "That's not a question for a geologist." I said, "That's a question for an economist." I said, "You know what an economist is?" And audience, no. And I said, "An economist is a guy that didn't have the personality to be a CPA." I sat down, and the guy that introduced me said, "Mr. Pickens, I'm an economist." It was a horrible night for him. But you know, when I look at the United States, and we know, I took some huge hits in 08 and 09, and I had reached my peak net worth was about a little over $4 billion. And in 08, 09, I lose two. I gave away over a period of 10 years one. And so now I went from 4 to 1 down to 1.
Are you as happy now as you were then?
I'm happier because I'm getting ready to get married, and I'm very happy.
So love is better than money?
It is, yeah. I don't think it'll hold up, though.
But what's your view of what our energy sources should be as we move forward in this country?
Well, it's unbelievable what's happened to our country. But what's happened to the United States has affected energy globally. That is that we developed a method to go into the source rock, the source of oil and gas, which are carboniferous shales, and knew that the oil and gas was there, but ever imagined, I didn't, a geologist, I didn't have any idea we'd figure out a way to get the oil and gas out of the source rock. The source rock is unlimited in scope and volume, and you now have horizontal drilling, which is really the key to it. People like to say fracturing of the, you know, the reservoir and all, but fracturing, and I heard our president, he isn't always accurate.
That's the first time I've heard that.
It is. Now that's not true.
That's the first time I've heard it in the last 5 minutes ever since Mark finished.
But this guy gets up and he's telling about how in his administration that oil and gas has recovered in the United States and we're importing less oil all the time, on and on. And he said that hydraulic fracturing was developed by the Department of Energy 30 years ago. What's he talking about? I witnessed my first frac job, Halliburton, fracked a well that I saw in 1953. That's 60 years ago. He's only half right, and the Department of Energy probably didn't see a frac job till 30 years ago. It'd been done for 30 years before that. What we're seeing in the world today, where the United States, okay, let me take you back 40 years. 40 years ago, we went into the Mideast and have been there ever since. We went there because we were sure we were going to need their oil to keep us alive or whatever. And today we are using 18 million barrels of oil a day. The second to us is China. They're 10 million barrels a day. And they produce half theirs and import half theirs. And we're kind of the same category. We're a little better than that, but we import about half of what we produce. And half of the half that we produce comes from OPEC. That is what I focus on and have for some time, is get off the enemy's oil. That when you are buying oil from OPEC, not from every one of the countries, but some part of what you're paying gets in the hands of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And so it seems stupid to me. Now, our industry has done a fabulous job. We're as good, oil and gas industry is, as you all are farming. I mean, we are the best, you're the best. This is America and we have the best. And so our technology's advanced us to where we can access the oil and gas in the source rock, which I mentioned. And that's where we are today. We're the only country in the world where our oil production increased the last 3 years. It has gone up. We're now up to over 8 million barrels a day on oil. And we have an infinite amount of natural gas. We are number one in the world. We were like number 4 10 years ago. We're now number 1. We've passed Qatar, Iran, and natural gas reserves. We will have the cheapest energy in the world, meaning that because of the cheap energy, that you will have manufacturing that moved away from us will come back to the United States. It didn't move because of cheap energy, it moved because of cheap labor. But cheap energy will start to overwhelm cheap labor because their labor costs are going up continually.
There's one guy last night at dinner that was very excited about how cold it was, and I found out it was Cuban. Very excited about these cold temperatures and coming to Iowa because he's making money hand over fist.
Listen, Iowa, I love your weather. I sell gas. Enough said. Anyway, the other story that he's talking about is my dad. I'd been in school a year and a half, and I had started out in veterinary medicine and then switched over. I was in business school at Oklahoma State, and he came over to Stillwater, and we were standing there talking. He was getting ready to go home, and he came for this reason, and now he's going to be there 5 more minutes, and we now got to the point. My mother would get to the point in the first 5 minutes, my dad the last 5 minutes, but he said, you know, son, said, you've been in school a year and a half, and said, to date you haven't shown anybody anything. Okay, and he said, your mother and I have talked about this. I knew now this is serious. If he pulled her into the deal, because she was a disciplinarian in the family, so he had, you know, he had her proxy, and now he was ready to go. He said, you know, we're going to stick with you until June of '51, and that's 4 years. And he said, I don't know whether you're on that schedule or not. And I wasn't, definitely not. The first year and a half I was off schedule. And so I didn't confess anything at that point. I just listened. And he said, so you got to get out of here in June of '51. And he said, you need a plan, son. And he said, a fool with a plan can beat a genius with no plan. And you have no plan. Your mother and I are afraid we have a fool with no plan. Well, when he said that, I knew that I was really in the soup at that point. They have a fool with no plan. And he said, get in geology or engineering and get the hell out of school in June of '51. I'd taken 8 hours of geology at that point, and so the next day I got my transcript, went over to this was on a Sunday, Monday morning I was over got a meeting with the Dean of Geology and Dr. Monette. I went in and I showed my transcript. And he said, well, Pickens, your transcript doesn't impress me. I said, it didn't my dad either. He said, I think you maybe, geologists are optimistic. They have to be because they drill so many dry holes. And so he said, you know, he worked on it. He said, you know, we can get you out in June of '51 if you go to one summer school, carry 2 18s and a 19. He said, you're out. I said, I want to tell you, Dr. Monette, this doesn't mean much to you, but it does to me. I now have a plan. I went one summer school in 19 and 2 18s, and I was out. And I finished pretty good in my class, the first in the top 10, but I was one of the 4 guys out of 28 that got a job as a geologist. And so it worked out. I did get a plan. That's what you got to have a plan. I don't care who you are, what you're doing or something. You got to have a plan.
So thank you, Mr.
I like the comment.